Don't you dare come back. That's what my husband of 20 years yelled, slamming his hand on the table, all because I said I wanted to help care for my granddaughter who had broken her leg. 20 years. I followed his lead on everything. And in the end, what did I get? Where else could you possibly go besides this house? This time I didn't argue. But I also didn't stay. He called me irrational, said I was blowing things out of proportion. Said I wasn't allowed to leave without his permission. But deep down I knew, this wasn't just about the child. This was about me. About reclaiming the right to make decisions for my own damn life. That morning I had just finished scrubbing the house top to bottom. I hung the last towel on the drying rack, ready to make myself a cup of tea and sit down for a breather when the phone rang. Emma's name lit up the screen. My heart sank. My daughter isn't the kind of person who calls out of the blue, especially not on a weekday afternoon. She works as a school counselor, always on the run, barely catching her breath. I picked up the phone right away. "Mom," she said, her voice tight with worry, "Lily got hurt at school." My fingers went numb. The mug nearly slipped from my hand. "What happened? Where is she? Is it serious?" Emma took a deep breath, but her words still tumbled out fast, trembling. "It was during the school sports day. She fell from the monkey bars. The doctor says it's a fractured forearm. They've put a cast on her. She's okay now, but she has to stay home for a few weeks, no school." I closed my eyes. My knuckles tensed around the edge of the counter. "Is she in a lot of pain?" Emma was quiet for a few seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. "She keeps asking for you," she said. "If Grandma were here, she'd tell me stories until I fell asleep. Then it wouldn't hurt so much." My eyes stung. Lily is my only granddaughter, and from the moment she was born, she became my softest spot. No matter how busy I was, I always made time for her, even if it was just a quick video call. "Do you need me to come?" I asked without hesitation. "I didn't want to trouble you." She paused, and when she spoke again, there was a trace of bitterness in her voice. "But I really can't take time off right now. The end-of-term evaluations are coming up. If I miss too many days, it could hurt my contract renewal next year." "I understand." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. "I'll drive up tomorrow morning. Don't worry." The moment we hung up, I was already mapping the drive in my head and mentally packing a suitcase. It was about a 5-hour drive to Emma's, far but doable. If I left early, I could get there before lunch. I started pulling clothes from the closet when I heard heavy footsteps thudding across the living room floor. Frank's voice followed, gruff and impatient as always. "What are you doing in there? Lunch isn't gonna cook itself." I turned to face him, hesitating for a moment before deciding not to beat around the bush. "Emma called. Lily got hurt. She broke her arm." He walked up, his brows knitting together like thick ropes pulled tight. "So, her mom can't take care of her?" I answered quietly. "Emma's swamped at work. He can't take time off right now. I'm planning to go help out for a few days." It was like lighting a fuse. Frank exploded. "You're leaving? What about me? Who's supposed to cook? Who's doing laundry? Who's gonna remind me to take my meds, huh?" His words came fast, sharp, like I'd just announced a luxury cruise instead of saying I'd be caring for our injured granddaughter. "Frank, she's my granddaughter. She needs me right now. You'll be fine for a few days. Order takeout, eat some frozen dinners. The house won't fall apart without me." He stared at me, stunned, like I'd just confessed to an affair. "It's just a broken arm. Kids fall down all the time. What's the big deal?" I could hardly believe the words coming out of his mouth. "She's 9 years old," I said, voice trembling but firm. "And you're a 68-year-old man. If you can't survive a few days without me, the problem isn't my absence. It's that you've never learned how to take care of yourself." He slapped the arm of the chair so hard the sound echoed. "You walk out that door, don't bother coming back." I stood there, listening to his angry footsteps stomp back to the living room, the TV blaring as he cranked up the volume like it was some kind of power play. But all I could hear was Lily's voice over the phone, sniffling, "Grandma, are you really coming?" I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my half-packed travel bag. And then it hit me. These last 20 years I've been trying so hard to maintain the illusion of a blended family. I cooked, cleaned, put up with Frank's moods, tolerated his son Brian's cold indifference. I even planned their damn holiday dinners like I was some kind of unpaid event coordinator. All to make this marriage feel like a home. But the only people who ever truly saw me as family were Emma and Lily. I looked down at the rough lines on my palm, the traces of a life spent giving. So much care, so much effort poured into everyone else. Maybe now it's time to give myself a little of that care back. Maybe it's time I start showing myself some damn respect. The house fell into a heavy, suffocating silence after that night. By 6 the next morning I was already awake. The sky outside was still dark and the whole place was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. I crept downstairs to make a simple breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, and a pot of Frank's favorite black coffee. I knew he liked to sleep in, but I still wanted to keep the peace before leaving. Once breakfast was set on the table, I headed back upstairs and began packing. A few changes of clothes, some medicine, and a handful of Lily's favorite storybooks. Each item carefully folded and placed into my travel bag. My hands were gentle, but my heart pounded heavier with each motion. Just as I zipped up the suitcase, the bedroom door opened. Frank walked in with a storm cloud on his face. "You're really going through with this?" His tone wasn't angry like yesterday. It was colder, cutting and mocking. "You're just going to abandon me?" I took a deep breath. "I'll make sure everything's set up for you today. I'll drive to Emma's tonight. Lily needs someone to look after her." He set the coffee mug down on the nightstand with a clink, his voice hardening. "We already talked about this. While you're off playing grandma, who's supposed to take care of me? Frank, I've cooked your meals, sorted your meds into daily pill boxes. All you have to do is take them on time." My voice stayed calm, but the steel underneath it was unmistakable. "I'm leaving. I have to." He stared at me like I'd turned into something he couldn't control anymore. Like a puppet that had cut its strings. "You're really gonna ditch me over some little injury your daughter's kid has? I'm your husband, Teresa. You have any idea how bad my stomach hurt last night?" I looked at him, unblinking. "You had 3 steaks and 2 beers. Your stomach doesn't hurt because you're sick. It hurts because you treat your body like a trash can." His face went red like I'd slapped him. His voice shook with rage. "You're talking back to me now?" "It's not talking back," I said, my tone even. "It's explaining. I'm not your nurse. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. If you walk out that door," he snapped, "don't bother coming back." The coffee mug flew off the nightstand and shattered against the floor. Porcelain shards skidded across the hardwood like sharp little accusations, echoing through the early morning stillness. I didn't answer. I just knelt down and picked up the pieces one by one, careful not to cut myself. He didn't speak another word that night. I still made dinner. I still laid out his pills. He lounged on the couch, pretending to cough so violently you'd think he was on his last breath. I glanced at him, wiped my hands dry on a dish towel and asked, "Want me to call 911? He stopped coughing. I finished the dishes, wiped down the counters and headed back upstairs for a final check. As I reached for the zipper of my travel bag, I heard voices from the living room. He hadn't closed the door. He was on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but the words hit me like stones. "She doesn't care about this family anymore. Everything's about her daughter now." I froze behind the door. "I told you, Brian. She's just here for the roof over her head. For the stability. I'm all she's got. But if she actually goes through with this, she can forget about coming back." Then came Brian's voice, quiet but clear enough. "Dad, don't you dare leave her any of your money. If she's running off today to help her granddaughter, next thing you know, she'll be handing over your entire life savings to her daughter. You're right. Don't worry. I've kept everything in my name, the house, the accounts. She doesn't even know. And honestly, if she can't figure that out, why the hell would I trust her to manage anything?" There was a sharp, amused edge in his voice, like he was talking about some clueless stranger, not the woman he'd shared 20 years of life with. In that moment, something inside me went cold and quiet. I stepped back into the bedroom and zipped up the suitcase. The sound was soft, almost reverent, like closing a casket. His words rang in my head on loop. So this is how he sees me. Not a partner. Not family. Just a live-in assistant. A housekeeper with emotional perks. A woman who traded her kindness and labor for the illusion of belonging. But that was never part of the deal. What have I really been clinging to all these years? A place where I'm needed but never respected? A house full of cold air and louder televisions than conversations? A man who called me too delicate when I was sick? A stepson who never spoke to me unless something needed doing? A husband who bragged about keeping me off every deed and account like it was some clever trick? A marriage where I was never truly seen? I sighed long and low and stood up. Outside, the wind brushed against the window panes, making the door creak softly. It sounded like the wind itself was whispering, "It's time. Time to choose another path." I picked up my phone and dialed a number. A few seconds later, Marcia's voice came through, still soft with sleep. "Teresa, you're still up." I leaned against the wall and whispered, "I'm about to head out to Emma's. Lily's hurt, she needs me." She paused. "You mean tonight? Right now? That's serious." "Yes. I've been thinking about it all day." Frank blew up over it, told me I wasn't allowed to go without his permission. It made me realize, my life here has been a joke. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a kind of quiet steel to it. "I don't want to wait anymore. Lily's waiting for me. I don't want to wake up tomorrow in this house that feels like it doesn't even breathe." There was a brief silence on the other end. Then she let out a soft chuckle. "You're finally pushing back. You're making a choice for yourself, and you don't need anyone's approval to do that." Her voice carried a warmth, something proud and almost relieved. "You don't owe anyone. Go and don't look back." I nodded even though she couldn't see me. "Once you're settled at Emma's, shoot me a message. And if anything happens on my end, you'll be the first to know." I promised I would. When the call ended, something in me felt unshackled, like a heavy lock had been taken off my chest. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my car keys, slung the travel bag over my shoulder and walked downstairs without looking back. Frank was already asleep. The living room was completely dark. I didn't turn on a light. I didn't leave a note. This wasn't running away. This was walking out, toward the people who truly mattered, toward the version of myself I wanted to live as. I pulled onto the interstate. The night was clear, the road ahead long and straight, like an open invitation. I turned on the radio. A female vocalist from the 70s was singing something soft but strong. I didn't bother switching stations or making any calls. I just sent Emma a quick text. "I'll be there by morning." And then I drove. Thought about Lily's little face, her arm in a cast and her voice in my ear. "Grandma, if you come it won't hurt anymore." My eyes stung. This wasn't about escaping. This was about doing something that meant something. Being there for a child who truly needed me. 5 hours later, I pulled into Emma's driveway. My body was tired, but my spirit was steady. I took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. The front door swung open almost as soon as I parked. Lily bolted out like a startled little bird. "Grandma," she cried, holding up her cast-covered arm as she ran toward me. I rushed forward, crouched down, and caught her in my arms. She buried her face in my neck, breath hitching, like she was afraid I'd disappear again. "You really came," she sniffled, voice as light as a feather. "Mom said you would, but I thought, maybe they wouldn't let you." My heart twisted. "When Grandma says she's coming, she comes," I murmured, gently patting her back. And right then I knew. I had made the right choice. Lily lay curled up on the couch, her left arm wrapped in a thick white cast, her small face buried beneath a rainbow-colored blanket, catching up on some much-needed rest. I sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, stealing quiet glances at her from across the room, careful not to disturb the rare peace that had settled over the house. Emma was on the other side, juggling a schoolwork call. Her phone was propped against the kettle, screen glowing with a colleague's name. She listened, nodding along, then flashed me a silent thank you with her lips. I just shook my head and smiled. It wasn't hard. Not at all. Compared to the last 20 years, I had never felt this at ease. The morning I arrived, Emma didn't say much. She simply pulled me into a hug, took my bag and led me into the kitchen. "Coffee or tea?" she asked. "Coffee, please." As she poured, she said, "She barely slept last night, woke up crying twice. The doctor says we need to keep a close eye on her. With kids this young, they're always worried the bones won't heal evenly." My heart clenched. "I'll take care of her. You go to work. We'll manage shifts when you get home." Emma handed me the mug. "Thanks, Mom. Having you here, it makes all the difference." None of us went out that day. I helped Lily change into looser clothes, tucked pillows under her arm to keep it propped and comfortable. She tried to be brave, holding back her tears, but when I opened one of her favorite storybooks and read a few pages, I finally caught the faintest smile tug at the corner of her mouth. "Grandma," she whispered as she leaned into me, "can you live here forever?" I looked down at her forehead, her lashes fanned out under the sunlight like tiny wings. "Do you want me to stay?" I asked. She nodded. When you're here, Mom's not as stressed. And I feel better too. I couldn't answer her right away. Because she was right. And because it had been so long since I felt not just needed, but wanted. Frank used to say he needed me. But he never truly saw me. Never really respected what I gave. He needed someone to keep the wheels turning. Not a woman with thoughts, emotions, a life beyond his living room. But Lily, Emma, they made me feel needed and seen. Welcomed. Appreciated. After lunch, Lily lay by the window on a small sunlit couch, and I stirred a pot of pumpkin soup in the kitchen. The breeze outside rustled the trees gently, birdsong weaving through the branches. Emma came in and handed me a drawing Lily had made. 3 stick figures holding hands. In the middle, a chubby-cheeked girl with round glasses. On one side, her mom. On the other, a woman in an apron. She said, "This is a family of 3 in the sunshine," Emma said with a smile. I took the drawing and something inside me softened, like my heart had just been wrapped in a warm cloth. She also said, "You're stronger than a superhero," Emma added gently. "You used to say that too," I chuckled. Emma sat down beside me, pausing before her voice shifted to something softer. "Mom, if you ever, want to stay here for good, I wouldn't mind." "Really?" I looked up surprised. "I'm not saying you have to," she added quickly. "Just, if it feels better here, safer. You don't have to hold on to that other house all by yourself anymore." I held the drawing in both hands, staring out the window where the wind chimes swayed gently in the breeze, unable to speak right away. That evening, I helped Lily wash her face, get into pajamas, and settled her casted arm on a stack of soft pillows. "Grandma," she asked as I tucked her in, "are you sleeping in here tonight too?" I nodded. "Of course. Once that arm heals, maybe I'll think about giving you your room back." She giggled. "Grandma," she said again, "don't stop coming, okay?" I leaned in and kissed her forehead. "As long as you need me, I'll be here." After she drifted off, I stepped out quietly. Emma had fallen asleep too, still dressed from work, curled up on her bed. I pulled the blanket up over her shoulders before heading back to the guest room. Lying there, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts ran without pause. And then it hit me, this was the life I wanted. Not a pristine kitchen. Not a well-arranged living room. Not a man who poured me coffee just to say he did. What I wanted was someone to call me Mom. A little girl who said, "It won't hurt if Grandma's here." I'm not someone's servant. I'm a mother. A grandmother. A woman still very much alive, still very much loved. The wind slipped through the open window, the night wrapping around me like a thick, warm blanket. I closed my eyes and told myself, it's time to start thinking about living somewhere new. Emma had left for work and Lily was still asleep upstairs. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the morning sun casting long, golden lines across the floor. The house was so quiet, it felt almost sacred. For the first time in my life, I felt safe, sitting in someone else's kitchen. There were no demands, no barking orders. No, "Did you make breakfast yet?" No, "Where are my pills?" I gently lifted the cup of coffee Emma had left for me, but before I could take a sip, my eyes drifted to a stack of papers sitting in the corner of the table. It looked like Emma's household binder, receipts, folders, maybe something she'd sorted through last night. I reached out and casually flipped through it. And then I stopped. There it was, a faded photocopy of an old draft agreement. The title read, Post-Marital Asset Management Proposal, Draft. My brow furrowed. I kept reading. It outlined a shared household contribution policy, and went on to specify that all real estate and major financial assets would remain under their original owner's name, with one key note. Inheritance rights explicitly exclude Teresa's biological daughter and any of her descendants. The further I read, the colder my hands became. Frank had never once let me handle the finances. Whenever I asked, he'd wave it off with, "Don't worry about it, I'll take care of it." And I believed him. I thought we were partners. I thought what was his was also mine. I thought he would treat my daughter the way I had tried, foolishly, to treat his son Brian. But this document, this language, it screamed what he never had the decency to say out loud. "You're nothing." When Emma came home on her lunch break, I showed it to her. She took one look and let out a long sigh. "I've been meaning to tell you for a long time, Mom. He came here that year with Brian. Said he wanted to be clear about everyone's roles and responsibilities, especially around aging and caregiving. But when I saw that paper, I knew. He never saw you as part of the family. I stared at her. Why didn't you tell me then? Emma's voice dropped. Because back then you wouldn't have heard it. You probably would have said something like, "It's thoughtful of Frank to think ahead." I didn't want to break your heart. I still hoped you'd be happy. I leaned back in my chair, my head throbbing. "Mom," she said softly, "you need to protect yourself." She hesitated, then added, "Marcia actually called me last week. She said you should speak to a lawyer. She gave me someone's contact info." I looked up. "I want to meet her." That afternoon, Marcia met me at a small cafe on the edge of town, sliding a business card across the table. The cafe was small, but as soon as I sat down, I felt like the world had opened up. Marcia looked just the same, sharp, no nonsense, but her tone was gentler than usual. "You finally said it," she smiled. "Teresa, this is Sharon Hill. She's been doing asset division and women's legal advocacy for over 20 years. She's the right person for what you're facing." I didn't even glance at the card at first. I just looked at Marcia. "Did you suspect Frank for a while?" She didn't lie. "You're my best friend. I've seen how exhausted and invisible you felt all these years. But you didn't want to hear it. And when you're not ready to listen, there's not much anyone can say." I lowered my eyes, finally picked up the card and nodded. "I'm ready now." 2 days later, I walked into Sharon Hill's office. She was in her early 50s, dressed in a neutral-toned suit, with sharp eyes and a steady voice. I told her everything. How Frank controlled the finances, how Brian had always kept his distance, how we had no joint accounts or co-owned property, how my name had never appeared on a single document that mattered. She took notes quietly, then closed her notebook. "Teresa, based on what you've shared, you're entitled to pursue marital asset division. A 20-year marriage with long-term caregiving responsibilities absolutely qualifies you for a claim." My heart pounded. But I didn't bring in much money. I used to work in a hospital, but after I quit, I was just cooking, cleaning, taking him to doctor appointments. She looked me straight in the eye. "That's called contribution, not unpaid labor. And yes, courts do recognize it." I froze. No one had ever called it that before. She continued, "We'll start with a financial asset review under Frank's name, real estate, investments, account balances. Then we'll move on to establishing authorization rights and estimating total value. I'll help you preserve the evidence and initiate the process discreetly, without raising any alarms." I nodded slowly. My voice was quiet but sure. "I'm done waiting for crumbs." Sharon smiled. "Then we're done waiting. Let's begin." By the time I stepped out of the firm, the sky had turned dark. I stood at the corner of the street, the wind tugging at the hem of my coat. I didn't pull it tight. Instead, I looked up at the fading sunset. And I knew I'd spent too many years fearing the consequences of being difficult, of being seen as the wife who pushed back. So I stayed silent and small, thinking it was safer. But I was done with that. This wasn't rebellion. This was reclaiming dignity. Back in my car, I sent a single text to Emma. "I've made up my mind. I'm divorcing Frank." We had just finished dinner that night. Lily had gone to her room to rest, and Emma was still in the kitchen rinsing off the dishes. Then out of nowhere, the doorbell rang. Not the gentle kind. It was a series of hard, rapid, almost violent knocks that sounded more like fists pounding on the door than a bell. Emma froze, dish towel still in her hand. I instinctively stepped over to Lily's room and gently pulled the door shut before heading for the front. The moment I opened it, I saw Frank standing on the porch, his face a storm cloud. Behind him, Brian stood with his hands shoved in his pockets, expression blank. "How long are you planning to hide here?" Frank said, his voice low and charged with condescension. I said nothing. One hand rested on the doorframe as I stared back at him. "You've been dodging my calls for a week. Not a text, not a single word. Just ran off to your daughter's place and started playing house." His voice was quiet but laced with fury, like every word was dipped in gasoline. I didn't flinch. I just asked, "What are you here for?" Brian stepped forward, feigning concern. "Dad just wants to talk. He's worried. It's not safe for you to be out here alone." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Right. Because being in a home with my daughter and granddaughter is clearly more dangerous than living in a house full of emotional blackmail." Frank's eyes narrowed. He hadn't expected me to fight back. "Have you lost your damn mind?" he growled. We've been married 20 years and now you just walk out, then hire a lawyer behind my back to file for divorce? Emma appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a towel. She moved to stand beside me. She's your wife, Frank. Not your maid, she said coldly. If you really cared about her, you wouldn't have told her she wasn't allowed to leave when her family needed her. Frank's face turned red. That was just something I said in the heat of the moment. Emma didn't budge. And we've heard enough of your heat of the moment over the years. Since the day you joined this family, you've never once known how to show care like a decent person. Brian cut in, annoyed. This isn't helping. You're just trying to stir things up. My dad's not well. You can't keep stressing him out like this. I looked at them both, my voice calm and razor sharp. Frank, I gave you chances. I told you why I had to go. I left your meals, your pills, I explained everything. I didn't just vanish. You chose not to listen. And now you're here thinking you can bully me back into your control. Frank's mouth twitched. He clenched his jaw before barking. Fine. Walk away if you want, but don't expect a dime. The house, the accounts, everything's in my name. You won't get a single brick. A door creaked open behind us. Lily. I saw her small eyes peeking out from the crack in her door, frightened. Emma turned quickly. Lily, sweetheart, it's okay. Go back to bed, I'll be right there. I turned back to Frank, steady and unshaken. You're not the man who can silence me anymore. I'm handling this legally now. If you don't want to embarrass yourself further in front of a judge, I suggest you turn around and leave. Brian muttered, she's been planning this the whole time. I turned on him with a glare colder than steel. Don't pretend this is about anything other than your father's money. I don't owe either of you anything. Frank stared at me for a long moment, his eyes full of fury. Then he spat, you'll regret this. He stormed off the porch, every footstep like a landmine. Brian followed, but not before turning to shoot me a look. Something between a threat and a grudge. I closed the door behind them and turned the lock with a soft click. Emma exhaled beside me. You okay, Mom? I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to Lily's room, switched on the soft lamp by her bed and sat beside her. Her eyes were damp. She whispered, was he yelling at you? I took her tiny hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. No, I said softly. He just doesn't know how to speak to me anymore. And this time I didn't let him. She nodded, not fully understanding but understanding enough. You're not going to leave, are you? She asked. I smiled and tucked the blanket under her chin. Grandma worked really hard to get her life back. Now that I'm here, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, listening to the quiet sounds of Emma tidying up the kitchen, the wind chime outside swaying softly. It sounded like celebration, like freedom. I wasn't the woman who swallowed her words anymore. Frank said I'd regret this. But deep down I knew. The only one who should feel regret was never me. After that day, Frank never came to the door again, but I knew he wasn't finished. A few days later, Sharon called. She told me Frank had hired a private attorney and sent his first official response. It wasn't aggressive, but the tone made it clear. They were testing whether I was just acting out or truly serious. I was sitting in Emma's living room, folding Lily's laundry while Sharon walked me through every possible legal strategy over the phone. They'll try to paint you as emotional and unstable, she warned, her voice firm, because that makes it easier for a judge to lean in Frank's favor when it comes to asset division. But we're not going to let that happen. The way she said it, calm, unwavering, reminded me of the voice I used to have back when I fought for my patients' rights at the hospital. It had been so long since someone spoke on my behalf like that. That afternoon, Marcia took me to a women's rights forum held in the community room of the downtown library. At first I didn't want to go. I wasn't used to airing personal matters in public, and I didn't think I had anything to say that hadn't been said 100 times before. But once I sat there, surrounded by middle-aged women whose faces felt both foreign and familiar, I began to see my past reflected back at me, layer by painful layer. Some spoke about being treated like domestic partners instead of wives. Others shared stories of being financially blindsided after their husbands died, realizing they had no legal claim to their homes. One woman talked about adult children who treated her like a free babysitter and a walking ATM. The more I listened, the tighter my throat became. Marcia leaned over and handed me a tissue, her smile warm. Want to share your story? I shook my head at first. But then the host turned to the group and asked, "Would anyone like to talk about what they're going through right now?" I stood up. My voice trembled at the start, but I forced myself to stand straight. "My name is Teresa. I'm 65 years old. I've been married for 20 years to my current husband. I've done nearly everything in the home, because he never hired help. He didn't need to. He had me." A few women chuckled and nodded in recognition. I never complained, not even when his son ignored me, not even when my name was never added to a single financial account. I thought that's what being married meant. I paused, took a breath. Then my granddaughter broke her arm and I decided to go care for her. He looked at me and said, "If you walk out that door, don't come back." In that moment I realized, I'm not a piece of furniture. I'm not some background prop in his life. I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. And I am my own person. The room went still. Then applause broke out. And for the first time in a long time I didn't cry. I smiled, from someplace deep, honest and alive. After we got home, Emma and I began organizing my financial records. We contacted banks, traced transactions and compiled every shared account I might have been tied to, however passively. Sharon issued a formal letter demanding partial account freezes and a full asset review. "You didn't sign away your rights," she reminded me. "They can't erase you." Right on cue, Frank sent a handwritten note, tucked into his lawyer's response. 2 pages. It began with, "Are you out of your mind?" and ended with, "You're ungrateful." The final line read, "You had it better than most women. Why can't you just be content?" I folded the letter and let out a short, bitter laugh. Emma read it and said, "That's the problem. He thinks everything you had was a gift from him." I nodded. "And that's why I have to show him. I'm not begging. I'm claiming what's mine." That night I opened my notebook and started drafting a will. Frank's name wasn't on it. I wrote down Emma's and Lily's names, carved out their shares, and left the rest to the local women's shelter and the volunteer medical program where I once worked. I wanted to leave a clear imprint of the life I lived. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's stepmother, but as a woman who chose to rewrite her story. When I closed the notebook, the wind chime by the window stirred softly. I stood up and looked out, watching the delicate metal pieces dance in the breeze. No one was controlling my windows now. No one was telling me what I could or couldn't decide. For the first time, I didn't owe anyone anything. That day, I returned to Frank's house for the last time. I didn't bring much, just the legal documents, Sharon's written authorization, and a simple checklist I'd made of the personal items I still had there. Sharon offered to come with me, but I refused. "I need to do this myself," I told her. "I want him to see the woman he no longer gets to control." The house looked the same. The porch was tidy, the lawn manicured like always. But as I walked closer, nothing about it felt like home anymore. I rang the bell. The door opened seconds later. Frank stood there wearing a faded flannel shirt, face hard as stone. He didn't say a word. I handed him the letter. "I'm here to collect my things." He glanced at the paper but didn't take it. Instead, he stepped aside and muttered, "Come in." I didn't waste words. I went straight upstairs to the bedroom I'd slept in for 20 years. The bedding was different now, cold tones, modern textures. Definitely Brian's wife's taste. I packed what little I had left. A few clothes, a photo album, 2 old notebooks from my days as a nurse, and a small wooden box. Then I picked up the only thing in that house that was truly mine. A photo of Emma as a child tucked inside the nightstand drawer. When I came back downstairs, Frank was standing in the kitchen facing away from me. I placed my bag by the door and said evenly, "I'll be filing the divorce papers next week. My attorney will handle the process." He didn't turn around. "Must be nice. Living at your daughter's, everything done for you. No responsibilities." I hadn't planned to answer that. But I stepped forward anyway. "I'm not mooching, Frank. I'm caring for my granddaughter. I'm being respected by my family. That's something I never got here, just orders and guilt trips." He turned to face me, his eyes tired and angry. "Brian won't even come over anymore. Says I've let this become a circus. Says I'm a disgrace." I nodded. "Because this house isn't your stage anymore. You were fine with women being silent. Now you're just scared we've started speaking." He leaned against the counter and sneered. "You think you're going to have it easy now? You leave this marriage with nothing. That house. I paid for it. Those accounts. My name. What do you think you're walking away with? I lifted the bag, met his gaze and said clearly, exactly what I deserve. And you're losing the one thing you never valued. I didn't wait for his reply. I opened the door and stepped into the sunlight. It hit my face so sharply my eyes stung, not from sadness but because freedom had taken too long to reach me. That afternoon I signed the divorce papers. Sharon placed a small pink tab on the signature page. Whenever you're ready, we'll file tomorrow. I set my pen down after the last signature, took a deep breath and said, file it. I rented a one-bedroom apartment just 10 minutes from Emma's house. The window faced the park. Lily loved the swings there. On move-in day she helped me decorate the kitchen, plastering stickers everywhere. She insisted on taping up her Welcome Home Grandma poster on the fridge. It's still there. A drawing of the three of us, me, her and Emma, holding hands under a tree. Above us, in bright crayon letters, it reads, H.E. A few days later Brian called. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Teresa, he said, overly polite. My dad's not doing well. Doctor says his blood pressure's out of control. Could you come check on him? I was quiet for a beat. Then replied calmly, he's not my responsibility. I've already filed for divorce. He paused. You've really changed. I have, I said. I finally figured out what, and who, is worth my time. I hung up, walked into the kitchen and ladled sweet corn chowder into a bowl. Emma had just walked in from work and Lily was finishing her homework at the dining table. The place was small, simple, but every corner beat with life and laughter. No commands, no control, no one saying, you have to listen to me. This was the home I'd always wanted to return to. The day the divorce decree became official, the sky was unexpectedly clear. I didn't wear dark colors. I didn't wear grief. Instead, I put on the pale green sweater Emma had given me. The moment I stepped into the courthouse lobby, Sharon gave me a smile and said, you look like you're headed to a celebration. To me it is, I replied. This celebration just happens to be called the restart of my own life. The hearing itself was surprisingly simple. Frank didn't show up in person. His attorney came on his behalf, said nothing, just signed the papers. And I felt nothing. No pity. No nostalgia. For 20 years I had never missed a meal, a doctor's visit, a holiday gathering. Now all I was doing was legally stepping away from a system that drained me. When the judge confirmed the ruling, it was official. I was awarded my rightful share of marital assets. This included a portion of Frank's retirement benefits, my half of the joint account balance, and a share of rental income from a property under Frank's name, for the next 3 years. I wasn't greedy. I simply took back what was mine. As I walked out of the courthouse, sunlight washed over my face. I didn't wear sunglasses. I didn't look down. Sharon asked, so what now? I smiled. I'm rewriting my will. She blinked then nodded. Got it. I know just the right person to help with that. Later that week I sat at the wooden dining table in my new home, a blank will template spread in front of me. Outside the window the park was full of late afternoon light. I could see Lily running across the grass after school. Her cast had been removed, and though she moved with a bit of caution, her steps were lighter, freer. As her laughter carried through the open window, I started to write, line by line. All of my cash assets will be evenly divided between Emma and Lily. My share of the rental property income will go solely to Emma. My life insurance payout will be placed into a trust for Lily, to be accessed when she comes of age. All books, collectibles and personal effects will be left to Emma to manage. Any remaining assets will be donated to the West Bay Women's Shelter and the St. George Community Health Fund. When I signed my name at the bottom, I felt a rare stillness inside me. I used to let everyone else make the decisions. Where home was, how money should be handled, who would arrange my affairs when I was gone. But now it was finally my turn. Emma was on the couch peeling an apple, watching me as I slid the documents into a folder. Mom, she said, aren't you scared? I mean, being on your own now. I turned to her and answered honestly, I am. But what scares me more is going back to a life where I waited every day for someone else to tell me, you're allowed. He handed me a slice of apple. So what's next? Are you planning to stay close to us? Or? I grinned. I've applied for a volunteer spot at the city's Children's Health Center. Orientation starts next week. Her eyes widened. You're going back to nursing? I shook my head. Not going back, moving forward just in a different way. They're looking for licensed retirees to teach health workshops, do screenings. The hours are flexible. I can still pick Lily up from school. She nodded, her eyes misty. I'm really proud of you. Lily and I made a little deal. Wednesday afternoons were now grandma time. That week we went to the library. He picked out a picture book and asked me to read it aloud. Halfway through, she looked up at me and asked, Grandma, does this mean no one can ever make you leave again? I paused for a second, then smiled, brushing a hand through her hair. No, sweetheart. Grandma has her own house now, her own work, and her own rules. That night, I placed the will in a box on the top shelf of the bookcase and labeled it, written in the year freedom began. I didn't look back. What I left behind didn't need me anymore. What was ahead was mine to write. Autumn had arrived, and the breeze slipping through the window cracks carried a crisp chill. I was standing over the stove, stirring a pot of pumpkin soup. The kitchen was warm and fragrant. Lily sat at the dining table, scribbling in her workbook when she looked up and asked, Grandma, are we making a turkey for Thanksgiving? Of course we are, I smiled. But this year you're in charge of the mashed potatoes. She wrinkled her nose. Then I'm gonna need an apron or Mom's gonna scold me. Emma walked in just in time to hear that, setting her keys down and chiming in, I only scold you when you don't wash your hands before stealing sliced apples. The kitchen filled with steam, spices, and the kind of sounds that soften the heart, gentle teasing, clinking dishes, the warm rhythm of ordinary love. This was the life I wanted to hold on to. Simple, lively, and full of mutual care. Just as we were setting the table for dinner, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on a towel and headed toward the front door, assuming it was a package delivery. The moment I opened it, I froze. Frank stood on the porch, bundled in a heavy coat, hair grayer and messier than I remembered, his eyes restless in that familiar, agitated way. He didn't carry anything. He didn't say hello. He just looked at me, as if there were 1,000 things he wanted to say but couldn't force a single one past his throat. What are you doing here? I asked calmly. You moved out a while ago and he trailed off, eyes down, fingers twitching slightly. I just wanted to see if you're all right. I didn't respond right away. I stood aside slightly but didn't invite him in. He looked up, voice lower than usual. Is there really no chance of going back to how it was? I looked at him for a long moment, letting the question settle between us. Frank, we're divorced. What exactly are you hoping to find here? He winced as if he hadn't prepared for honesty. You lived in that house for so many years, I keep thinking you should still. Should what? I cut in, my voice still level. Keep cooking your meals, washing your clothes, picking up your meds, reminding you to make your doctor appointments? Like I owed you that. His mouth opened slightly but no words came. I didn't betray you, Frank, I continued. I left someone who never appreciated me. That's the clearest choice I've ever made in my life. He turned his head as if something hit him square in the chest. And then came the quiet. The kind of silence that follows the first crack in a long frozen lake. I'm getting old. I don't know what to do anymore, he finally said, his voice shaking like a man lost in his own life. I took a slow breath and nodded. Then you should call your doctor. Or your friends. Or Brian. But not me. Something flickered in his eyes, resentment, sorrow, but he didn't fight back. Are you really happy now? He asked. I met his gaze and said clearly and sincerely, yes, I am. Frank nodded slowly. When he turned to walk down the steps, his movements were a little unsteady. I didn't walk him out. I just stood in the doorway for a while, watching as he got into his car and drove down the street, the engine fading at the corner. When I finally closed the door, it felt like sealing a window that had been cracked open for 20 years. And it no longer needed to stay open. A few days later, I officially began my volunteer work at the Emma City Children's Health Center. 2 days a week, I helped with basic health screenings and led a program called Grandma's Class, where I taught young kids the basics of self-care, healthy eating, and emotional awareness. That first morning, standing in front of a classroom full of neatly seated first graders, I felt a flicker of nerves. But by the end of that first session, watching those small, curious faces, their eager hands raised to ask questions, something in me exhaled deeply, because I realized I hadn't lost my value. I just found a place where my voice was finally heard. That Thanksgiving we didn't invite anyone else, just the three of us. Me, Emma, and Lily. We set the table with 3 place settings. On the wall next to the dining table, we taped up Lily's crayon drawing of the family in the sunshine. The one with all of us holding hands beneath a bright yellow sky. When we raised our glasses, Lily said solemnly, "I'm most thankful that Grandma is always here." I looked at her, then at Emma, and said quietly, "I'm most thankful that for once, I'm not just being used to hold life together, but being truly invited to be part of it." After dinner, Lily went back to her crayons while Emma and I cleaned the kitchen. I reached into the cabinet and pulled down the labeled box, the one holding my updated will, medical directives, and emergency contact cards. I handed it to her. "Mom, what's this?" she asked. "It's my plan," I said after a pause. "I don't want anyone else making decisions for me later. I want to leave you something clear and simple, and maybe even a little space." She didn't take the box. Instead, she took my hand. "You've never been a burden," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You've always been an example." I smiled, blinking back the heat in my eyes. That night, I sat alone on the balcony, watching as the streetlights flicked on one by one. The wind chime at the door gave a soft clang. I glanced down and noticed a new sticker Lily had added. Read, "Granny's hands never let go." I reached out and traced the edges of the sticker with my fingers, whispering, "That's right, sweetheart. Not this time. This time I wasn't letting go. Because this life, this chapter, this voice, this home, finally it belonged to me."